Hello, I'm Louise Ross, the author of Women Who Walk, how 20 women from 16 countries came to live in Portugal, and the sequel or companion read, The Winding Road to Portugal, 20 men from 11 countries share their stories. And today on the left side of the screen is my friend and neighbour, who is one of the interviewees in The Winding Road to Portugal, Fernando Machado, who I met not long after I moved to Portugal. And in fact, Fernando introduced me to the condominium complex where I now live and hosted a very good friend of mine in his guest house, which he has run for about 10 years. We might have a chance to talk a little about that. But we have been great mates since that time. That's probably about 6-7 years ago, I think, Fernando. But today, Fernando is going to read a small excerpt from his story. And so I'm going to hand it over to you now to read that excerpt. Thanks, Fernando.
You are very welcome, Louise, and thank you also for your friendship first, and for having me on the list of the men that you wanted to write about. So yeah, here I am, and I will start reading part of what you wrote about me. So here we go. I think of myself as second-generation African with Portuguese ancestors. In the early 90s, my father's parents immigrated from the Trás-os-Montes region in the north of Portugal to Angola, Portugal's largest colony. They went to a very remote area about 2,000 kilometers southeast of Luanda, called Terras do Fim do Mundo, the lands at the end of the world. Their plan was to settle and cultivate rubber trees. I believe my mother's parents met in Portugal and decided to immigrate to Angola. They settled on the edge of the Namibia desert in a town on the coast. It was an important fishing area as the waters were extremely rich with marine life. My parents met, married, and lived in Luanda, the capital of Angola, where I was born in the mid-50s. Most of our family travels were spent in Angola, but every 4 years we would take a boat from Luanda to Lisboa. When we came to Portugal, it was like a different world. Lisboa was an interesting city to visit because it was so much older than Luanda. When I was 12, my parents exceeded themselves organizing a holiday for us to travel by bus from Lisboa all the way up to Norway. Air travel then was not as easy as it is today, and so it was more common for people in Portugal to buy bus excursions to visit other countries. I was finishing high school when I decided that I wanted to study architecture. However, to do so meant that I would have to leave Angola. I discussed it with my parents, and we agreed that I would go to Lisboa, where my brother was already studying medicine. The months I would plan to leave, October 1974, the political situation in Angola was already hot to the degree that it was clear we all needed to leave. There were 3 Angolan groups fighting the Portuguese army for independence, and they were also fighting each other. Small towns and villages had long been affected by the civil war between these tribal groups. My family got out just before the fighting came into Luanda. Along with my parents and one set of my grandparents, we sailed for Portugal. When we arrived in Lisboa, we moved in with my brother, whose small rented apartment was in Benfica. The six of us lived there for a short time before moving to a larger apartment. My father went back several months after we had left to try and save some of our belongings, but it was a dangerous situation. He was caught in open fire in the city. He did manage to save some things, but it became clear to my parents that they would have to rebuild their lives in Portugal. A difficult prospect for people in their late 40s, and also because they loved Angola. It was the place where they thought they would live out their lives.
Thank you, Fernando. There's something incredibly compelling about those paragraphs that I picked out for you to read. First of all, I think I found it compelling because of the grand romance, perhaps, of the emigration of your grandparents to these two rich environments of Angola, the place at the end of the world. I think that really caught my attention. I can't pronounce what it is in Portuguese, but of course it evoked something quite romantic to me, I think. And then the fishing village on the border of the desert as well. So there's this a very evocative past or heritage in your family lineage of Africa. And then, of course, with the civil war that caused so many Portuguese Africans or African Portuguese to flee Angola and other former colonies, you're kind of ripped from this idealistic or ideal childhood or this ideal period of your life, and you come back to Portugal, where old Europe is so vastly different from your childhood in Africa. So I want to ask you, what was that like for you? You mentioned what it was like for your parents, but what was that like for you?
Well, Louise, as you mentioned, living my childhood in Africa, in Angola, where I was born, and I stayed there for the first 18 years of my life. I had a great time living there. As far as I remember, that time was mostly a very happy time for me and for my family. We were living in the capital of Angola, Luanda, on a very safe, let's say, environment. The civil war that raged Angola since 1961 basically didn't affect life in Luanda or in other major towns. We could, me and my brother and my parents, we could travel quite often to other regions of the territory. And then in 1974, when I left Angola, and I have to say, I never went back there.
Oh,
So it was, yeah, that's right. It was my final farewell to my homeland, I had to adapt to a new environment, almost a new culture, even if there is connections, cultural connections in between Portugal and Angola on that time that I was living there. But yeah, Portugal was a very different place. The most common or the easiest thing to adapt it was the language, because Portuguese was the same language spoken in both uh, territories. So that was not a problem at all for me to adapt. But Luis, I was 18 years old when I moved to Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess by that age, most of us, we easily adapt to new environments, new places. And I remember that I, shortly after I came to Portugal and living in a, let's say, a popular neighborhood, a residential neighborhood in Lisboa, the one of Benfica, that is better known because of the soccer team that is based there. But I started to make new friends because I lost, I would say, almost every friend from Angola. There was no internet, and there was uh, uh, there was let's say difficult conditions on that time for us to stay in touch, and most of my friends also, they left Angola about the same time as I did. So I truly lost track of most of them. So I had to make new friends, and I was fortunate enough to find a group of new friends that they are still, some of them, they are still, let's say, real friends of mine. So more than 40 years ago that we know each other. And then after I went to the university, I did study architecture, even if I never worked as an architect, but that's another story. So for me, it was not difficult, I would say, to adapt to life in Portugal, and I was feeling good here. So this is the way it happened to me.
Yeah, and this has become your home, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, I have been here in Portugal since 1974. Even if I still feel myself as an African-born human being, but I'm a Portuguese citizen, and this is my home. In particular, this region where we both live, on the outskirts of Lisboa. This is my place, the one where I feel better, and I truly enjoy to be here. Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you, Fernando. I think that's all we've got time for. And I really just wanted you to share a little about your story, and you've done that, and I thank you so much. And for those people who are interested to read more about Fernando and his winding road to Portugal, of course you can in the book titled The Winding Road to Portugal. Thank you so much, Fernando, and we'll talk soon. We'll talk again soon.
You are very welcome, Luis. Thank you so much again, and hope to see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.